I used to think a wedding dress would feel like wings, light and holy, like it could carry you down an aisle you've dreamed about since you were a kid. But the morning I put mine on, it felt like rope tight around my ribs, tight around the life I thought I was stepping into, and in St. Gabriel's with 200 people leaning in for a fairy tale. The pastor asked Trent Wallace if he'd take me as his wife, and the room went silent in that way where even the air holds its breath. Then he leaned to the mic and said, "No clean as a cut." And the laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp like glass under your shoes. And I walked out by myself with my bouquet clenched so hard, the stems bruised, head up, stomach dropped, thinking this is how a person can be undone in public and still pretend they're fine, you know what I mean? Nina drove, my mom cried. My dad wanted to go back in and teach a boy what man means, and I told them to drop me at Windward Green by the water, because I needed sky and strangers and a bench to hold me together. I sat there watching kites slap the wind, trying to build a cathedral out of my breathing, when a little voice said, "Hi." And there she was, 6 years old, light-up sneakers, blonde curls, studying my face like I was a story she might like, and she said, "You're really pretty, princess, pretty but not mean." And somehow that cut the ropes more than anything else that day. Then her dad walked over, tall and kind around the eyes, introduced himself as Caleb Rourke, apologized for his daughter's honesty, and offered me dinner or just something warm because I looked like I needed a room without whispers. And pride is a cage, but I was tired of being locked up. So I said yes, as long as I could help with the dishes. Caleb's place in North Point didn't show off. It welcomed wood floors, family photos, the kind of lighting that makes you feel human again. And his daughter Piper told me about her mom. Eva Sells got confused. Heaven keeps her now. And while Anna spooned chicken with lemon like medicine, Caleb asked about my bakery shift at 4 a.m., about cinnamon in winter, and regulars who tell you their whole life without ever saying the words, and he listened without pity. Which in that moment felt like gold. Then, after we cleared plates, he said he ran Harbor Works and was building a client relations team, people first work for families, buying their first home. And if I ever wanted out of flour at dawn, I could come meet his crew. No pressure, not charity. Just a door I could walk through or not. And I heard myself say, "I don't have a degree, I have bills and a pile of bridal magazines to burn." And he said, "We train, we pay, we invest. You bring the heart, and we'll teach you the rest." I took the interview, shook hands with Monique at the front desk, who smiled like she'd been keeping a seat warm for me, rode the elevator to the 28th floor, where the bay looked like a future and not a wall, found a note on my new desk that said, "Welcome to the team," in a hand I'd later learn belonged to a 6-year-old who insisted on purple flowers, and I started at $65K with real health insurance and a tuition option if I ever wanted school, which felt like someone had finally told me the rules and handed me a map. The first week I kept my head down and my ears open, learned the rhythm of people who are excited and terrified to spend their savings. Watched Monique turn chaos into calm. Watched Gus, old school agent with a tie for every mood, grunt at me like a test, and later grunt warmer after he heard me talk a widow down from the ledge over a plumbing note in an inspection report. And at night, I still woke up to the echo of no in a microphone. But mornings I put on a blazer that fit clipped on a nameplate that said Layla, client liaison, and felt myself starting to belong. 3 weeks in, Caleb stopped at my desk with 2 coffees and a manila folder said River District was launching Harbor Row 20 townhomes, with buyers who wear complicated cologne, and the kind of expectations that arrive in black SUVs. And he wanted me as primary client relations, longer hours, bigger commission pool problems that require grace under fluorescent lights you in, and old me would have apologized for breathing. But new me said, "Say when," and the answer came back like a grin. You know how life evens out just long enough to make you forget the waves. Then the wave hits, and it hit in our glass lobby at lunch. Monique buzzed and said, "There's a Trent here to see you, extra calm, like you talk to a dog. You don't want to spook." And there he was by the windows, in an expensive apology, said, "I looked different. Costume change, congrats." Said he made a mistake, family, pressure, panic. Not really him, and yeah, that happened. Then he said we were good, and could be good again, that his parents would welcome me now that I worked, where I worked. And the words slid off his tongue like oil, and I said it's called work, and said my answer was no. And then the revolving door breathed open, and Piper walked in from the dentist, with a sticker like a medal. Looked at Trent with that child X-ray, and asked if he was the mean man who made my heart cry, and he tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. And she said, "If you mean it, you say sorry, from your belly, not your mouth." And Caleb put one precise sentence into the air. "We're done here." And Trent pivoted to spite, said, "When this job goes away, and I'm back to scraping foam, don't call." And I told him I wouldn't, and meant it. Then I finally breathed. That should have been the end. But gossip loves a vacuum, so the invitations started. Brunch from his sister Camille, which I'd been waiting 3 years to get in another life, and I passed then a visit. I didn't invite from his mother Eleanor. All gardenia and decades of practiced charity who sat in my office and said, I looked very smart, and the space was darling, and apologized for her part in what she called the wedding unpleasantness. Then explained Trent was miserable, and I grounded him, and now that I was successful, it was easier to see how I might fit, and I said, I'm not a throw pillow. And she smiled thin and said, Don't be naive, jobs end, and families endure. Men like Caleb hire girls like you to feel philanthropic, and then they move on, and when that door closes, ours won't be open. And I told her I can turn my own doorknob, and the only thing I ever mistake for acceptance is kindness, which is why her son was never going to be my husband. And when she left her card, I recycled it. The twist landed a day later in a sunlit coffee shop where I used to pour espresso like a love language, Camille, blinking back guilt, telling me their father had given Trent an ultimatum 3 days before the ceremony. Marry me and lose his stake and his future, or walk and stay in the will he planned a state senate run and thought I'd cost votes. And yeah, that's a different kind of wound. I wasn't enough, but I was too much for a family's fragile view of power. And she also told me Trent was sanding my name in rooms where my work lived, saying I'd slept my way into Harbor Works, saying I was convenience to the boss. And I felt the heat rise, the kind that clears the fog, and said if he kept slandering me, he'd get a letter full of Latin and an invoice, and back at the office, Caleb brought 2 coffees, like a ritual, and said we'd send the letter. We'd call people who prefer truth to gossip. We'd make it public if we had to. You don't fight this alone. And I asked why he fought like that for me, not coy, just tired of guessing. And he said, Because I'm in love with you, plain as a porch light. And he knew it was complicated. Knew I worked there, knew we'd do it, clean, HR looped boundaries set. Monique telling us we would not be messy, and we weren't work, stayed. Work home became soup and spelling, and Piper's monologues about vegetables being a human rights issue, Harbor Row, sold out in 6 months, with buyers asking for me by name, and an email landed with a tuition voucher and a note that said, If you want nights and weekends, you pick the pace, and I took 2 classes and fell in love with the feeling of not knowing and then knowing brick by brick. In late spring, we stood under string lights and white roses in the backyard and kept the ceremony small. Judge Mendez talked about second chances and stubborn hope. Caleb vowed like a builder who knows storms come, I promised to choose and try and forgive and laugh. Piper carried rings like she carried the moon, and we kissed while the roses clapped. And later I saw a figure by the side gate. Trent older around the edges, and Caleb's hand found the small of my back, and I said, "I've got it," and Trent said, "Congratulations, you look happy," and I said, "I am." And he said, "Camille told him, she told me, and he should have told me himself, and he did love me, but he was too weak to choose it over the life set out for him," and I said, "I hope you're brave next time. Everyone deserves a shot at being brave." And he nodded and left without theater, and I felt a chapter close and a pen in my hand. Here's the part people argue about, and I hope you do kindly and loudly. Did Caleb hire me because he saw me, or because he wanted me? Did I climb because I'm good, or because a man opened a door? If the daughter of a billionaire tells you you're pretty, does your life get easier because someone finally looked? Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I know. Work is work, and love is love, and power is real, and so is choice. I said yes to a job and then earned it. One anxious client at a time. I said yes to a man who made me bigger, not smaller. And I said no to a family who thought crumbs from a gold table should make me grateful. And if that bothers you, tell me why. Drop your take in the comments. Who was right? Who was wrong? Where's the line when love, class, and power share a room? And if a no ever turned into the best thing that happened to you, share that too. Hit subscribe. If you want more stories told, plain and true, and let's argue with heart about what fairness actually looks like. Yeah,